Zoom can go live or not?
Yeah, now only I find out about that. Okay, I'm gonna monitor. Okay. Yeah, now only I find out about that. All right. Okay, I'm gonna monitor. All right. So we have some viewer now.
Hello.
Hi. Shall we? Let's wait a bit more.
Sure.
Waiting for people to come in. It's after dinner.
Yes. Have you had your dinner?
Yeah, I had my dinner. You? Have you had your dinner?
Not yet.
Okay.
Wondering how's everyone doing today? Thank you for tuning in on a Thursday evening.
Yes, it's probably a long day, and perhaps we can just start a bit.
Sure.
So, hi everyone, welcome to this Facebook Live event by Relate Malaysia. I'm Kay, the host for tonight's live event, and I'm delighted to be introducing the guests today, Clinical Psychologist Evelyn Soong, who will be sharing her insights on managing conflict within relationships. Evelyn has extensive experience providing psychological assessments, psychotherapy, and intervention for children, adolescents, and adults across a wide range of issues, including chronic pain, depression, anxiety, trauma, and adjustment-related issues. Through her work, Evelyn values looking beyond the issues to connect with people as she helps them with their recovery and growth. And in tonight's session, she will be providing us with practical guidance on how we can navigate conflict and reconnect to our friends and loved ones. So for this evening session, Evelyn will be focusing on three main questions. Number one, how does conflict arise in relationships? Number two, how can we then spot the indicators of an unhealthy relationship?
Yeah.
And last but not least, what are some of the strategies we can apply to manage conflict within relationships? I'm curious already. So if you have any questions you would like to ask Evelyn, please feel free to share them in comment section. Evelyn will try to get through as many as she can. And on that note, let me welcome and hand you over to our guest speaker today. Over to you, Evelyn, and thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, Relate Malaysia, for having me today. I'm honored to be talking about managing conflict, especially in relationship. But before we go into the details, since today is day 2 of CMCO, for those who are tuning in from Klang Valley, KL, Selangor, and Putrajaya. So just to check in with everyone, how's everyone doing this evening?
We have someone saying hi. Elisa, say hi.
Hi, Elisa. So regardless of where you guys are tuning in, I'm tuning in from Bukit Jalil here, and I believe a lot of you are from different parts of Malaysia. And right, so today is second day of CMCO here in Selangor, KL. I'm based in KL, and I guess everyone is pretty much, some of us I hear that they are quite stressed out, and especially when children childcare center, it's closed right now, and they have to go back to the whole routine of working from home, taking care of their kids and things like that. So I believe during this period of time, it can be also quite stressful, especially for some of us who are living in smaller spaces, and It's stressful when we need to work from home, we have to juggle everything, and conflict do arise, especially more so during this period of time. And as we all know, even the previous CMCO, during that period of time, there has been an increase, as we all know, in cases of depression, anxiety, and domestic violence as well. And it boils down to, a lot of interpersonal relationship issues and conflict related matters. So for the next hour, while we will talk about managing conflict in relationship, when we talk about managing conflict, right, we often think about problem solving, right? We want to fix things, and we often tend to, rush into finding solution for that. But oftentimes, when I see clients, we tend to forget what's the reason or what's the issue that started this whole conflict to begin with. Right, a lot of times we tend to, oh no, okay, this has happened, I need to quickly fix it. Or some of us may have experienced some unpleasant kind of confrontation, and then we just choose to, okay, I'll just be quiet and I don't want to address this because I don't want to rock the boat and things like that. So I believe it has happened in some degree in our relationships, and the relationship that we'll be focusing on today would be domestic relationship, for example, with particularly with your partner or with your kids, right? So my mission today is basically to share different perspective on the clients that I've come across. I'll be giving some examples on that as well. And how can we actually manage conflict through understanding? Now, as I mentioned earlier, we won't be able to come up with a solution without actually understanding what is exactly the issue. So how do we actually approach that when it comes to understanding, and how do we facilitate conversation and make a person feel, less anxious or less defensive when we are resolving certain issues? So that would be my mission for today. Um, what I think perhaps it would be useful for you guys who are tuning in today, even though we were talking about some techniques and strategies, but I would also like to invite you for this hour to give yourself the permission to reflect, to basically slow things down after a hard day at work today, to slow things down and give yourself permission to reflect on your current or your past conflicts. So if you have any questions to ask at all, this will be an engaging session. Feel free to leave your comments below at the chat, and we will also attend to them as we go along. All right, so we're ready? Okay, let's start right now. Now, I'd like to start off with an activity with you guys. So whenever we talk about conflict, okay, the word conflict, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Now try to reflect and try to think back on your recent conflict recently with this particular person at home. What happened that time? What happened during the conflict? And what's your body feeling? What are you experiencing? Have you been able to express all these challenges and difficulties and all these emotions that you were going through that time? If yes, how did that go? And if it's a no from you, why not? What was the difficult thing that made expressing all these different emotions or thoughts difficult for you? And I believe a lot of us, when we are thinking about all these different conflicts, oftentimes it may, we may relate it to a lot of negative feelings, and we just, okay, I'm feeling unhappy about it, but I'm just gonna, I just want to find issues to quickly solve it. But are we actually giving ourselves that opportunity to understand what is actually going on? And are we actually listening to the other party on what is actually going on as well? So before coming out with a plan and agreeing to work on these plans, first we need to understand the nature of the conflict. And I think oftentimes even in therapy, right, we may, couples or families may come in with issues and say, hey, I would like to resolve some anger management problem, or help me to help my partner to hear what I'm trying to say. Because every time when I try to express, then she tends to get emotional and we don't seem to get anywhere with our conversations and things like that. So before coming up with a plan and agreeing, I think a lot of the work really falls into understanding. So for today, basically, I'll be splitting the session into 4 parts. The first one would be understanding some of the common issues that couples or families that I've been hearing, and some of the research that has shown during this pandemic, what are some of the challenges that they face. Secondly, we'll be talking a little bit about, watching out for some warning signs and when would it be considered as unhealthy relationship. Because sometimes during conflict, we may think that it's okay, but actually some of the actions of a particular person is actually not that okay, right? The third one that we'll be talking today is also to cover on what can we actually do to make a person understand, to make the conversation or the resolution be possible. How do we make a person less defensive even, and to share some techniques when it comes to managing children as well when it comes to conflict. And fourth, last but not least, you have any questions, we can also address them at the end of the session. Okay.
Yes, definitely. We will. I'll read them out as well so that you can answer.
Right. Okay. So now conflict. When we talk about conflict, it's basically, definition-wise, it's conflict happens when there is two individuals or more, and it happens in situations where there's differences or opposing in wills, perspective, beliefs, right? So some of the conflicts that I've noticed in my practice and also studied in overseas is that a lot of times it can be split into two different categories, basically. The first one would be situational. So when we talk about situational, we're actually talking about during this pandemic, a lot of us may have lost our job and we may have experienced some pay cut. And during this time, it can also be extremely stressful because you have bills to pay, you have loans to pay, maybe you have kids that you need to take care of, or your wife or your husband at home that you need to look after. But a lot of times these issues, some families, they may not actually discuss it or not actually talk and to come up with a plan on how to navigate for the remaining months. So when we talk about situation, it can be also due to a lot of all these financial issues. Secondly, it also comes to, imbalance labor or roles at home. Because right now with daycare, it's closed, schools are closed, parents may need to pick up or take up additional roles on top of their work. So they have to take care of their kids who, especially young children, they can be needy, they want lots of attention, and this can be extremely stressful for parents. So if you have a partner who is not exactly cooperating when it comes to child caretaking, so that can actually increase possibilities for conflict as well. Thirdly, we talk about lack of personal space. So this is something that we slightly touched on earlier. If you're staying in a place where, confined space, and you have to share this living room where you work and your kids play, your husband or your partner works there as well, that environment can be very distracting and stressful for you. And when we talk about situation, I also like to touch briefly about from the cultural perspective, because we are all in when we talk about collectivistic kind of culture, every one of us, we try to preserve harmony and try to avoid conflict. And there's even some studies that have shown times where, because harmony is so important for us, so because of that, we may actually suppress some of the thoughts or feelings that actually is bothering us. And over time, this can be accumulated into bigger issues as well. Now we talked about situational, and all these things can actually lead to a lot of interpersonal conflicts. So, for example, when you are already angry with your partner or your child, that would actually, instead of, if you don't want to resolve the conflict, that would actually pull everyone further apart rather than pulling everyone closer and addressing the issue. This would in turn foster into other forms of misunderstanding and resentment, and all this lack of communication will also lead to a lot of blaming and perhaps unrealistic expectation as well, because sometimes when we are angry about certain things, we can be passive aggressive, and we portray certain behaviors, and sometimes all these things can be unconscious as well, but other party may misinterpret that signal, or maybe they pick it up and they would react to it. So sometimes I think when we talk about understanding and when we talk about wanting other party to have a space to express, I think it goes back down to developing this whole safety and this whole feeling of connectedness. With this pandemic, seriously, guys, we are already quite distant with each other. So I think this would be really a really good opportunity for us to perhaps try something new and try to connect with other people in other ways. Learning, this is what we call, like in family, right? We say, how do we learn new language when it comes to communicating with family members and communicating with your kids? Right, so I can't see if there's any comments so
Yes,
far.
actually, quite some comments already, as you
Okay.
explained about the conflicts, like
Sure.
it seems like CMCO is like having all these criteria, fitting all these criteria. And Wayne Saw actually asked, like, how should we handle conflict within the family? And yeah, so that's the first one. That's another one.
Okay, so how should we handle conflict within family? Thank you for your question, Wayne. This is something that I'll be addressing in the third part for today, so bear with me. Okay, this is something that I will definitely be addressing, but feel free to share briefly. When you talk about family, are you referring to specific family member or family as a whole? Okay, and that will also help with our discussion today. So I also see another question here from Joan.
So she's asking, like, what to do when the conflict is ongoing and lasted for a long time? I think this is a very valid question, actually. Probably a lot of people might experience that. And how may someone go about approaching the issue?
So if the conflict has been going on for a very, very long time, and okay, so perhaps I will address the how to do. So some of the techniques first, then after that, I'll go back to explaining when would it be considered as unhealthy relationship, since this is something that you guys are asking right now as well. So, okay, we will address that. Now, how do we address conflict within families? And if it has been going on for a long time, how do we make people to be open to talking about it? Now, there's a few things that we can look into. When we talk about conflict, again, it involves two parties, right? One would be the person who is taking in, the listener, and another one would be the person trashing out or talking, what we call as the speaker. So there'll be, let's say there's two individuals right now that we are talking about. Now, if we want to resolve certain conflicts within these two parties, first thing first is I would say, especially in session, what I'll do with my clients is that I would set ground rules. So if let's say you are actually referring to some of your family members, you drag them with you, okay, say that, hey, I noticed recently that you have been quite distant and I'm just checking in what's actually going on. Is there something up between us? So take the opportunity to check in with them first, ask them if they would like to talk about it. And if they say that they would like to address it, just give them, because a lot of times when we address conflict, it is not an easy thing for both parties as well. So, how do we make each of the individuals feel safe? So, if let's say you are the one initiating it, you can actually tell this person, I'm here ready to listen to you. I would like to hear your thoughts, and I would try my very best to listen to you, and I would not, just chip in between, because I do value and I do respect what you want to share. So whatever that you share, I won't be taking it personally. I'll try not to, but I believe that both of us, we're talking about it right now because we really want to work things out. So first step first is setting ground rules. What we did right there is to set some ground rules, letting the person know that, hey, I'm ready to actually work things out and to listen to you. And I'm also respecting you. When you set all these ground rules, make sure you try the best that you can to follow them, right? Because a lot of times when the other person, when they're expressing something, and we can very easily go into defensive mode, right? For example, when the person say, every time I come back home, it's always me who is taking care of the kids, but how about you? Then you may get like defensive by saying, who say I've tried to do this, I've tried to do that, and you're not really listening to me. Then this is where arguments will escalate. So first thing first, if let's say you really want to work things out, these ground rules, make sure that, setting boundaries and be respectful, reassure each other, we can agree to disagree, because what we're going to be talking about, you have your own view, I will have my own view. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong, or both of us can be right too. So that would be the first step. Now, the next one, as a listener, I would say a lot of times it really goes back down to, first thing is, goes back to our own self-awareness. Remember just now when I asked you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we talk about conflict? Maybe a lot of us may have a lot of all these negative kind of feelings towards it, because conflict is not something pleasant. But conflict, a lot of times, if we allow it, it can also be an opportunity for us to grow from it. Because we're talking about relationship. Even though if say, you have your kid and you think that you know your kid really well, or you've been married for 20 or 30 over years, or you've been staying in the same household with your family, you know them really well. But actually, we can't be sure that we know a person enough, right? So be open to really hear them out. And first thing first is to be aware about yourself, to have all this self awareness, especially when it comes to our non-verbals. Sometimes when we have a discussion, we may fold our arms and frown, and the other party really trying to express and see you frowning like that. Perhaps it can be quite turned off. Yeah, and especially if you put your hands
Yes.
like that and really look really angry, but even though you're not, because perhaps you're just anxious as well, right? So as a listener, be aware of some of the non-verbals that you are portraying. And I would say the next step would also be really tuning into what the other party have to say, really listening. When we talk about listening, it's always easy to say, right? But when it comes to certain situations, when we have difficult conversations, really tuning in to what the person have to say can be quite difficult. And I have to admit, for me, even as a practicing clinician for many years, sometimes really tuning in, that takes a lot of effort as well. Relationship takes effort, right? It's just like going for the gym, it takes effort to build. So really listening to this person and hear what he or she has to say. Don't push your agenda. So if the person is trying to tell you, you're not helping me with house chores, what? Who say I'm not helping you? That's not listening anymore. That's being, you know, two parties trying to make their point across, but not really listening to one and another. When a partner or a person that you're talking with complaining or making some remarks about some of their thoughts or their discomfort, what are they actually trying to tell you? So using this example about house chores, for instance, if your person says that you're not helping me at all and everything is just me doing it, you're just sitting there all the day, what is this person trying to tell you? Does this person feel that he or she is not supported, that he or she is burnout and just wants you to actually help out in the family? And there's a really good way to clarify whether you have understood what they say is what we call as reflecting. So once you have listened, you have registered, it's always good to reflect back to that party and to see whether you have understood correctly. So, for example, using the same scenario that we spoke about earlier, maybe you can try by asking this person, I hear that, I hear and I see you feel really irritated that I'm not helping you with the chores at home, and see how this person actually react to it, because a lot of times conflict happens when our emotions have not been addressed, number one. Number two, when we feel misunderstood, and that is when escalation will happen. So try to listen and try to reflect whether what you have understood from that person is correct or not. If that person saying, no, that's not what I mean, why you cannot understand what I'm saying, right? Some of us then we may feel agitated after that. So try to take a step back again. I know it's not easy, but try to take a step back and ask this person, okay, help me understand. I really want to understand what is actually you're going through that I can help with.
And Evelyn, I think as you talking about listening and reflecting,
Yeah,
some of our audience seems to have some questions about it.
sure.
Joshua mentioned that, is victim mentality an issue when it comes to conflict in relationships? And I think there's another one, a similar one from Uni, saying that if the person is very revengeful, how do you communicate to make him less revengeful then?
Right. So one would be the victim. Just now I see Joshua mentioning about, oh, I missed the message.
Victim mentality.
Victim mentality. So the person wants to be comforted, I assume, if that's what you're referring to, Joshua. Victim mentality. So yes, in a relationship, a lot of times a person may feel that they are the victim in the situation, especially more so when they feel, a lot of times as the victim, they may feel fearful and they may feel that their thoughts is not important or not listened to. And perhaps in certain situations that I've encountered with families, is the victim may tend to show a lot of behavioral kind of issues. For example, they may have anger outbursts, right? Or they may use words that belittling kind of words. And at the end of the day, why do they need to play the victim role in order to get the message across? That would be the first question that I would, try to understand. Is it because this person, you know, whether or not their thoughts and their feelings have not been listened to over time, and whether or not by using this victim card, a lot of times people will then tune into them on what they have to say. Is that the situation that is happening? If that is the situation that is happening, I would say that one thing that we can do is try to listen what this victim have to say and try to reflect back and try to understand if this is actually what they're going through. Earlier just now, I hear the other comments about
Is it like from Eunice who
mm,
asked that, if the person is very revengeful, how do you communicate to make him less revengeful?
mm. So if a person is revengeful, this goes to show that this person, there can be a lot of different possibilities, right? But one of the possibility is also, again, using the victim example, why would this person need to use the revengeful method in order to have his or her message being uh, passed through? And if this person is really revengeful, perhaps, he or she feels that he's not really being understood. The message is not actually being heard. Again, I would still go back to the basic listening. What is this person actually telling you when he makes all these revengeful kind of remarks? What is it exactly about? What are you hearing? And if we may reflect back to this person, so you are feeling revengeful towards your partner because she is not doing something, something, something. And sometimes by reflecting back like that, and as the receiver, the end recipient, if we hear it, we may think back on our actions as well, because some of this revengeful or some of this victimization kind of behavior, it can come as an unconscious kind of action, right? So it's always good to again understand and to reflect back on how they actually feel and think, right?
So
So
there's also another question from Delisha Klumai who asked that, any techniques not to absorb other people's negative emotions while listening and to maintain healthy boundaries, which is
right,
a very important questions here.
yeah. So any technique, well, I would say whatever that they are saying, whatever that they are expressing, that's when they are trying to show you their worldview. Yeah. But that worldview, you can actually choose not to agree with it. That worldview can be true, that worldview can be distorted, but it's that person's worldview. And it does not represent your own worldview. You're there to understand and basically to listen to this person. And I remember one of my supervisor once told me, even in difficult relationships, right? A lot of times it's very easy for us to absorb all the negativity, all the different energy from other people, and it really drains us. What my supervisor said at that time is actually, Evelyn, sometimes in relationships, you need to take what belongs to you and return what doesn't belong to you, because what this person expressed is actually something that they are going through, but it may not necessarily mean this is you. Okay. So going back to, sometimes all these difficult discussions, especially if someone who is angry and you find it very difficult to speak to them, like Eunice's question about being revengeful. Another technique, another thing that I would also share is, if this person is constantly defensive and would say things, maybe you can just, check in with this person by saying that, I hear that, and I can also see you look really irritated, but I'm here, I'm listening. I just want to hear um, what you're going through. And I understand it can be really difficult for you, but I hope that you also know that I am here to listen to you. A lot of times, people who are revengeful, you can even reflect to them. I notice that you are really edgy. That I feel during this situation, I feel really uncomfortable when you make certain remarks, which goes back to the next point that wanted to share. As a listener, we can listen, we can try to reflect, we can try to empathize with the person, try to understand their worldview. But as the speaker, now as you try to juggle both roles, right? As the listener and as the speaker. And if you play the role as a speaker, always use the I statement instead of, it's you are this, you are the cause of all these problems. And oftentimes, this would, in the end, cause even more conflict. So try to use the I statement, and like what the example that I shared earlier, I feel really uncomfortable when you make these kind of remarks. And I wish that the both of us can actually talk about this and to come up with certain solution that we can both agree on, because I'm really keen to work this out with you. And a lot of times when in a conflict situation, we may say things like, um, as much as we try to use the I statement and to reflect, we may say like, I hear that you feel sad, but you also never listen to me, what? Right? So the first part was great. You did a really good job. I hear that you feel sad when I did something. Then the other half of the statement is when you say, but you also never listen to me. What are you actually trying to convey? Are you trying to say that I feel helpless, that my thoughts are not being heard? Or you feel sad or angry that you make certain remarks? So instead of saying, but you also never listen to me, we can perhaps change the language that we use. I hear that you feel sad when I did that. And actually, I also feel really helpless when I am not being listened to. Help your partner to understand what you are actually going through as well. What are the emotions and what are the thoughts that you're going through? And allow the other party to check in with you whether they have understood you correctly. As much as you check in with them, allow them, you can actually ask them, I'm wondering if um, the things that I shared, is it clear, or you would like me to repeat, or if there's anything that is uncertain or unclear that I'm sharing right now. If the other person say, actually, I don't know what you're talking about, right? It's always helpful to check in with them, and when it's inaccurate, try to repeat calmly on the things that you have shared. But again, if you notice that the person is actually having a block already and doesn't want to address anything, is not interested, you can choose to take a step back and tell this person that, I really hope that we can work things out. And I feel really upset that right now I see you're feeling irritated as well. So why not we take like 10-minute break and we'll come back to this. But if the person say, I don't think we have anything to talk about it already today. Okay, so if that's the case, should we address this issue tomorrow? Let's talk about it again tomorrow instead. But if this person say, no, I don't want to talk about it, I don't think it's an issue anymore, then perhaps you can address it in the sense that, oh, okay, on one hand, I hear that you say it's not an issue, but I see that you feel irritated as well. And I feel really upset. So again, addressing some of your needs. What are your needs and what are your thoughts? and to clarify with this person.
And there's another question as well, like as a person on the sidelines, how do we help in encouraging healthy communication from Joanne, especially both parties refuse to take a step back and listen? I think I think she meant that when the conflict between two family members is affecting your younger children in the house, how can we then encourage also healthy childhood and growth? Because for her, she realized that depression caused by household stress is
Yeah,
big problem.
yeah. I agree, especially, when I see families a lot of times when there's conflict happening at home, uh, you know, when parents bring their kids over to come and see me at my practice, right, they would say, like, my kid, he has not been focusing at work and has not been doing well in school. But as we try to probe further, then we notice there's actually conflict, as what you shared about Joanne, and this will actually affect younger children at home. And they may not, especially for kids, depending on their age, they may not express it outwardly by saying that I am feeling really irritated that both of you are constantly arguing, especially for young kids, because they may not be as articulate. They may show it from their behavior instead. So, how can we actually help these two parties? I would say if, let's say, these two person they're arguing, and with the kid there on the scene, we can gently remind these two parties that, hey, I know you guys are trying to work this out, but we do know that this can also potentially, affect the kid that is around. So if you like, maybe you guys can talk about it somewhere else while I will look after this child. And I always think that when we talk about encouraging healthy communication between two parties, as the mediator, a person in the sideline, I would think that that can be an extremely difficult work, especially if it's a family member. Yeah, but you can try your very best to, be the mediator. And if these two person they are willing, of course, right? If they both of them they are willing for you to be the mediator, then that's fine. But if not, and especially if it's a close family member, things can be quite tricky. Because if, let's say, my sister is the mediator for my conflict with my husband, then my husband may think that you're always siding her, what? So you may not be the best neutral party to be there to mediate this whole situation. So what you can do is perhaps to encourage these two persons to go for couples counseling or couples therapy even, because at the end of the day, a family is like a system that works together. Yeah. So if both parties it's already in a conflict, that can in turn affect other members in the family, including yourself as well, Joanne. Because to mediate, to be the person in the sideline, that's not easy at all. So I would say take a step back, try to speak to both of them together or separately, and checking with them whether they are open to actually meet a professional, mental health professional, to see if they are open for couple session. Because at the end of the day, we just want everyone to work together as a team.
Makes sense. And I think it's really stressful as well, hearing
Yeah.
that as well. And there's another sharing from Kathleen. She
Mhm.
mentioned that my sister hurts my feeling in 2017 and we haven't talked since then. And I did not even attend her wedding and I already forgive her, but I could not forget and so I do not want to know anything about her anymore. I feel comfortable the way until now, and she has strong personalities, and I'm an introvert. I don't want to be hurt again, so I'm keeping myself distant.
Mm. Thank you for sharing, Kathleen. And I hear that it has been going on for 3 years that you have not talked with your sister. Um, Even though you shared about you already forgive her for whatever conflict that has happened earlier, but something tells me through your message Correct me if I'm wrong, Kathleen, but I hear the hurt that you have experienced in the past. And even though, you feel comfortable to how it was before and you don't want to be hurt, something tells me that, you really forgive her, or you perhaps want her to know. My question is, the fact that you're keeping yourself distant and you're comfortable of where you are right now, is this distant um, disturbing you as well? Like, it's like something that is nagging at the back of your head. You know what I mean? Because it's like this, there's no closure to it. Even though there is closure from your end that you have already forgiven her for what she did, but question is, do you feel that you have already achieved closure mutually together with your sister? And how important is that for you? If that is really important for you, I'm not sure if you want to reach out to her to talk. But I hear that this is something that, it has been really painful for you. That's why you're distancing yourself. But perhaps something to do, to just think about, like the fact that you have been distancing with her from her for 3 years, you're comfortable where you are right now. Is this something that you still would like to address, or is it something that you're okay to just leave it at the back of your head?
Something to really think about.
Mm.
And I think back to Joshua, I think earlier Joshua asked about, victim mentality. So he clarified here, victim mentality as in an individual tends to, always complain about another and never or rarely thinks that it could be their fault as well. So since it's always another person's fault, they will never take responsibility to any conflict or issue in relationship.
Right. So yes, people can tend to be, adopt this victim mentality role, and not taking responsibility on some of the mistakes that they have done and things like that. So but if I may take a few steps back, right? How was it done previously when it comes to managing conflict with this person? When this person tries to voice up something, what is this person actually talking about? And how has it been being addressed, all these issues? If a person if you have to deal with this person in the long term, and if you still want to have a relationship with this person and try to work things out, first thing first, going back to the basic concept, understanding, empathize, try to reflect as much as you can. And if, let's say, there's a particular issue that both of you would like to resolve, this is something that two parties have to agree on. So we talk about understanding, reflect as the listener and as the speaker. The next part would be agreeing, mutual agreement. And this mutual agreement has to come from both parties. And both parties identify that this is an issue first. Now, we're not talking about this issue is caused by who and who yet, right? But we identify that, okay, this is an issue that right now it's stressful at home. The issue is we really need to work something out to manage our finances and chores. This is a mutual issue. When both parties agree that this is actually something to look into, then we can come into terms of, okay, so since this is an issue, what can we both do to resolve this issue? Now, it's very tempting for us once we identify the issue and we quickly jump into problem solving mode, right? Without really understanding what this person has to say. So again, whether the person is showing hostility or this person is playing the victim role, I would say go back to the basic, understand, reflect, and listen about their thoughts. You can share your thoughts. Both come into ground to agree, okay, this is an issue that we'd like to work on. Then you can come up with certain solutions from there on.
So I think Joshua also asked about, how much does a lack of paternal or maternal love affect an individual in a relationship with another?
Mm, This is a great question, Joshua. So when we talk about understanding, right? Oftentimes when we try to understand where is this person coming from, um, if you are comfortable with that, right? Because every one of us, we can have different kind of attachment, right? We can perhaps our childhood, we have a lot of trauma that we have experienced or lack of paternal or maternal love. This person may find it difficult to even express certain emotions, to express how they feel, because perhaps growing up, they have been raised in a situation or in families where expressing all these emotion doesn't come as easily. But using the victim mentality or playing this role perhaps is the way that they have been using throughout their lives and to cope with relationships and with situation. So I would say yes, it will in a way affect some degree when it comes to resolve conflict resolution. So when we talk about understanding, it's not just about, so there are a few levels of understanding, right? If you were to dive deeper into it, not just understanding what this person has to share and has to say, but also understanding the background that he or she is coming from.
I think there's also another question asking about, what do you think on the duration to settle the conflict? Should we solve it immediately or we leave it some other days, then only we solve it?
Right. Good question. This I would say it depends on the conflict a lot. If the massive, like big issues kind of conflict, right? You may not even be able to find a solution immediately. So maybe I'll give an example. So I saw this couple um, who brought their kid to come and see me, and initially the presenting issue was the child was depressed and things like that, so can't focus, have been having self-harm behavior. And as we explore more, then we notice that at home there's actually a lot of conflict going on between parents. Now, can we say that we can settle this couple conflict immediately? Because this has been something that has been going on for many, many years. And as we explore more, perhaps even going from, like more than 5 or 10 years kind of conflict, when we talk about mutual understanding, that this person is not actually understanding what I'm saying. And all this while, the wife said that I've been taking care of my kid. And now that our child is having these issues, then my husband comes back to blame me. But he has never played the role as a father and things like that. So a lot of times when we talk about understanding, before even talking about settling or coming with a solution, right? A lot of times during the process of understanding, we are already starting the settling process already, if I'm making sense. Because a lot of times when we talk about settling, we always talk about, okay, I need to come up with plan A, I need to do these three things, plan B, and what are the things that I need to do. But during the process of just talking to each other, sharing about thoughts and emotion, try to clear some of this misunderstanding. That itself is already part and parcel of settling the issue. So I would say certain issues perhaps you can settle easier. For example, like who to send kids to school, all these logistical issues. But when it comes to other deeper stuff, let's say, understanding each other's thoughts and feelings during the conflict and how to not make another party feel defensive, this may be something that will take longer periods of time. So do not be afraid to revisit them, because I think at different stage of our lives, we are constantly growing and we're constantly trying to understand the language that we use to speak to the other person as well. So if let's say the conversation starts to get heated, yeah, that's the time where perhaps it is the best to leave it for now and to come back another day. And this must be something that you will also need to speak to the other party about.
And I think speaking of that, Joanne also asked
Yeah.
about, what to do when parents are arguing and they refuse to listen to their children because adults will deal with the issue. I think she also elaborate a bit more. She mentioned that one of her family members have a very egoistic view in life and short temper. So she rarely accepts that she's wrong and lies and often shift the blame. None of other siblings likes her outbursts, and we now would like to avoid being around her at times.
Mm.
I feel this can damage mutual growth. And she's asking, what can I do?
Mm. Good question, Joanne. Yes, I think a lot of us, even as a therapist myself, sometimes we try to mediate, arguments between parents or some friends, but that may not be helpful. And exactly what you shared about, we may get remarks that, yeah, we will deal with the issue lah. You just diam diam lah and don't say anything about it, right? But you, as the child, or with your other siblings, are actually worried about it and worried how everyone is affected in the family. So I would say in situations like this, first thing first, I would even go into asking you or advising you to what to do and what not to do. First thing first is, how do you feel in this whole situation, Joanne? Because managing all these different emotions, especially coming from your parents, is not easy at all. And are you also getting the support from your other siblings as well? Because when we talk about all these family issues, right? And if let's say you are the only one who needs to deal with it, if in the event you get backlash and things like that, it can be really stressful and distressing for you too. So make sure first thing first that you have your own support as well. And I think your well-being is important than anything else in this sense. But if in the event say, okay, but I still want to help and know what to do, when both parties are defensive, I would say you can pick and see which party is easier to talk with first, right? So if let's say in this situation where you mention one of your family members is egoistic, it's difficult to talk with, so would it be possible to engage and approach the other party? Or if you would like to go with the egoistic or the person that you find um, difficult to, that the one that has short temper, if you like to talk to her, find a time when she is not um, reactive, right? Try to ask her, what is actually going on? I'm really worried about you. Reflect as though you are concerned about her. And that itself would make her feel like, okay, perhaps someone is trying to listen to me. And perhaps she would reveal certain things that she has never revealed before in the past. So try to use the I statement, going back to what we talked about earlier, using the I statement by saying, I'm really worried, especially recently. I see that you have this anger outburst and you have all this irritation that is going on. And I would just like to hear you out. Is there anything that I can do? But if she insists that there's nothing that you can do and she doesn't want you to be involved and the other party doesn't want you to be involved as well, the best thing that we can do in this situation is really to respect their decision. I know it's very difficult, but times like this, it's important to respect their decision. as well.
And I guess like time is almost up and we have a few more questions. Should we answer one last question?
Okay, before going into that, I know you guys have shared some of the conflict and some of the difficulties that you're experiencing. Just one last thing that I would like to just emphasize in today's session that we have not covered. It's about signs of unhealthy relationship. Yeah, especially during this CMCO period. We may be so stressed up, or the people around us that we notice, or even friends you notice, that you are worried for them and you wonder if they are in a unhealthy relationship, and you're wondering whether you are in a unhealthy relationship. So there are a few things or signs that you can watch out for. Right, number one, if let's say this person makes you feel unsafe, that makes you feel anxious all the time, this is the first thing that you need to watch out for. Secondly, is this person, when we talk about abuse, right, it doesn't necessarily have to be like outwardly physical abuse, but abuse can also happen through sexual abuse or emotional abuse. When we talk about sexual abuse, it's not just about, stranger dropping some sexual remarks on you. Sexual abuse can happen in families as well. And there's this thing called marital rape. If, let's say, your partner force you to perform certain sexual act, right, and that you feel uncomfortable and you've expressed it, but you're being forced to do so, that is a form of sexual abuse as well. Emotional abuse is when, this person say nasty things to you, name calling. The fourth thing is, if this person is controlling towards you on the things that you do, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't connect with your friends. There's this feeling like you feel in this relationship there's lack of freedom, and this person kind of like cuts off your relationship with other people, even your family members. These are all indicators of unhealthy relationship. And if you notice this happening to you and your current relationship, do feel free to call these two different hotlines. Assistance are available. The first one would be Women's Aid Organization. We will leave the contact at the comment section below. The second one would be Talian Kasih. So do reach out and speak to someone about this. And know that you're not alone during this, all right? Know that you're not alone.
All right, so I think it's very useful, and we've definitely have left the contact number over there. If anyone you come across in need of the support, or you may be in need of the support, do reach out for help. All right, so should we just answer one last question?
Sure.
So I think Petra asked, like, what if the person just can't understand why we're having such emotions? They think that we shouldn't have those emotions.
This is a very common scenario, right? Especially when we express our emotion and this person thinks that, yeah, you shouldn't feel all these things, like it's nothing, and almost like discounting how you feel. Yeah. Usually in situations like this, I mean, when we talk about securing, kind of have mutual understanding and connection with this person, we can't force a person to really understand how we want them to understand. Yeah. But what we can do from our end is when we express it, and we can check in with this person. Are you hearing what I'm trying to say? But if this person still says no, then perhaps we can adopt a more direct approach by saying, in this situation, sometimes I feel so and so, and I feel that it would be really helpful to resolve this. Perhaps you can do certain things to mutually resolve this issue. ask this person about what is his thoughts about it. Yeah, because at the end of the day, even though we lay out all these different emotions, he or she can choose um, not to, okay, not to say not to understand, but he or she may feel difficult to understand, really, because the intensity that we're experiencing, maybe we're really feeling depressed, but this person is like, hey, you're just normal sadness now. What's the big deal? And if the person really can't understand, try to express, if you're comfortable, what would be helpful for you in that situation. And try to express this with this person and see what is he or she's thought about it, and how would this person react towards this situation.
So I think thank you so much, Evelyn, for sharing this really practical guide, like on how to manage conflict in relationships. And I think I definitely take away a lot. There were a lot of insightful takeaways during this session. And also thank you everyone for joining the evening's Facebook live session. If you would like to find out more about Evelyn and her work, you can actually visit her website there, and we will leave in the comment section later on. And also you can check out her Facebook page or Instagram page at Evelyn Soong for some practical and fascinating bite-sized psychology content. So also thank you so much. And for our upcoming session as well, maybe I can share some with the audience as well. We will be hosting Dr. Bruce Wempold, Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as he delivers a live webinar on how psychotherapy works and how to improve your practice. So this will be happening on Monday, October 26th at 8 p.m. Malaysia time. So if you're a mental health professional or trainee and have yet to sign up, please do check out the details for the event right here on our Facebook page. So in the meantime, thank you so much again, Evelyn, for delivering such a wonderful session on conflict management. And thank you for joining us in the evening. Hope you have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, guys.